So, yeah, I suppose, firstly, you'll see I have a lovely slide. I finished up in DCU in 2012, and in here in 2008, and I suppose as someone who's been educated in DCU in recent years, I'm painfully aware of the amount of PowerPoint slides you see on a day-to-day basis, so we're going to try keeping to the one, right? But I suppose being in here, I suppose it brings back some memories. I suppose the first time I was ever in here was 2008. It was my orientation week. I was sitting right up just there, up above. And I'll never forget it, because like any kind of person, I'm from Kilkenny originally, like any person who kind of moves out from home, moves up to Dublin to go to college, like, you know, it's something that you really look forward to. It's probably not something you really look forward to because you can't wait to have your mind broadened and educate yourself. It's probably because it means you get to come home with a feed of pints on you for the first time and your mother's not waiting for you at the kitchen table, you know? And I always remember, like, you know, with that orientation thing on the Monday, and on the Sunday night anyway, I arrived up and got the stuff packed and got chatting to the fellas in the house and sure we had a few cans anyway. I woke up the next morning, I was living in Hampstead, right? Now for any of you who's ever been in Hampstead, you'll realise that they bought, the architects definitely must have bought the plans from the same guys who done Portneash Prison. Like, it is a lovely place, right? But I woke up there anyway and I went to do the blind. And there were these real sharp kind of blinds, right? And I ended up scraping my eye. And I kind of had tears flowing all the way down my face, and I couldn't really see out my eye. So I still had to come to this orientation thing anyway. So there I was, walking around campus with my hand over my face because I couldn't open my eye, tears coming down my face, and I ended up sitting up there. And I'll always remember, a fella came out, and you probably all got the same thing yourself. There's a fella who stands up here and gives a PowerPoint presentation about how you should lock your bike. Did you get that one as well? Yeah. So I got that, right? And I was there, and I was just and like tears coming down my face, couldn't use my eye, I was fairly hungover, and that was giving a pointless presentation, and I was just saying, oh Jesus, this is what college is all about, right? And I suppose, if I'm 100% honest, that moment probably summed up my college experience for about 3 or 4 years. Well, for the first 3 years, kind of, like, if we talk about, and I'm sure there's lovely strategy documents and things like that that have been written that tell you all the brilliant skills and attributes that you're going to develop as a graduate of an excellent university like DCU. But the fact of the matter is, I know for myself, I probably had a fairly stereotypical undergraduate experience insofar as I went out on a Monday night, went out on a Thursday night, had a few pints, tried to get the shift, it didn't really succeed too often, but sure I kept trying anyway. And kind of then, like, you know, twice a year you kind of got to this stage where you had exams, and you kind of passed the exams, not because you seen them as a career, as a key step in your career, but more because you didn't want to handle the bollock and you get off your outlook if you went home after failing, you know. And I suppose we were kind of, I was very much in a shared experience. Everyone I kind of knew, we were all in it together, like we were all kind of just drifting through college, and we were having great crack. But I suppose it was only coming towards the end of my third year that kind of I suppose I started to wake up and look at things a bit different. I remember we woke up one night, it was a Tuesday morning, we were after being in the big tree of a Monday, although I hear that's changed to coppers, very controversial. So we woke up anyway, right? And you know, sometimes, like when you're a bit hungover, like sometimes the depth of conversation, I guess like real deep and all, and you start talking about your feelings and the world and things like that. Yeah, it was one of them sort of mornings, right? And I remember, like, we started chatting, and I was like, oh, I remember Tommy, who was in 4th year when we were in 1st year, where's he now? And, oh, he's in Australia. And then it was, oh, what about Martin? Oh, I think he's on the dole down in Moat, in Westmeath, which probably would be the best place in the country to be on the dole. I hope no one here is from Moat, I've never actually been there. So we kind of started talking about this, and then we were kind of like, you know, well, why is it that, like, you know, kind of people like us never really kind of get involved? Like, I hadn't really done much of the whole kind of clubs and societies kind of thing, and, you know, I didn't really do the whole extracurricular thing, and no one I really knew did, right? And I suppose kind of, we kind of start talking, we're like, why did we not get involved? And why the kind of lads that we know, why did they not get involved? And I suppose one of the lads who's, I suppose, well, history will go down as a bit of a prophet, you know, because he came out with a key line. He said,
sure, why would you do any of that sort of stuff? Sure, it's all shy crack anyway, right? And I suppose we kind of started toying around with that, and we started kind of thinking about it. And I suppose we were like, well, yeah, like, I suppose if you think about it, like, you know, getting involved and doing good in the local community, what is it at the moment? It's like real boring stuff, like bake sales and bucket collections and kind of reading billboards that are meant to make you cry, but like, really at the end of the day, like, there's just no crack in it at all, like, you know, so why would you bother? And I suppose we just kind of started, and it was a group of friends, and I said, well, what if we could change that? What if we could make doing good kind of better crack? And what if we could all kind of just get people involved? And I suppose that's kind of just what we started doing. And we started kind of just organising events that were kind of good for the community, but were going to be enjoyable. So like underwear fun runs and like charity boxing things. Then we started being like, oh, well, can volunteer and be good fun too. And we started like, you know, like teaching, instead of voluntary tuition, we started doing like voluntary tuition through rap music for kids up in Ballymun, teaching kids Leaving Cert history through rap music. Or we started doing other stuff like, as opposed to just going in and dropping in on kind of elderly people in the community, we started getting kind of outlads and old folks' homes and teaching them how to do stand-up comedy, because every outlet has a few good stories from back in the day, you know. And I suppose that's just kind of what we started doing. And it really kind of took off. And so when I kind of started in DCU, I think like only about 2% of students got involved in any form of social action initiatives of their own free will. I'm sure there's some of you who are doing courses where they force you to do stuff, and like there is, that stuff goes on, but like of their own free will there's only about 2%. But now that's at about 10%, and there's obviously an active RAG kind of society on campus at the moment, and they obviously work very closely with us, but basically we set up that RAG society, but once we set it up and it really became kind of successful, there was, I suppose, a few people, I suppose with a bit more money than sense, who decided that we were maybe onto something, we were doing something good, and they decided to give us a few bob to try and roll it out around the country. So I suppose when I kind of hear this stuff like, you know, be a social entrepreneur and all that sort of stuff, I suppose I never really set out to be a social entrepreneur. To be honest, if I ever meet someone who calls themselves a social entrepreneur, no offence intended, I always think they're a bit of a spoofer, to be honest, like, you know, that kind of way. I don't really get it, like, the one thing, if any of you do it, like, the one thing that really gets me is like, when I'm going onto someone's LinkedIn or someone's Twitter or something like that, and it says like, you know, in their first sentence describing themselves as, I'm a social entrepreneur. Like, that's almost a sad way to be, like, you know, like, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I'm a teammate, I'm so many other things before I'm a social entrepreneur, if I'm even am one of them yokes, right? So just, don't be getting all worked up with kind of, you know, the labels and the identities that you give yourself. And I suppose, we kind of just started doing this anyway. Now we're kind of working with about 2.5 students in 8 colleges around the country. We'll hopefully have doubled. Within 3 years we'll be working with about 20,000 students in every country around the world, probably not. In every college around the country, potentially. And I suppose our hope is that, you know, there's kind of the 3 pillars that we kind of look at in the college experience at the moment, which is probably a voyage of sexual discovery, it's a voyage of discovery in relation to your attitudes towards alcohol, and it's also a voyage of academic discovery to some extent. And what we want to do is we want to add a 4th pillar to that. We want to make it a voyage of social discovery, when you find out what you're passionate about, when you develop the skills and confidence so you can go out there and you can do something about it. Because let's actually go and face it, right? Let's actually face up to the facts, all messing aside, right? It's people like us, people who are sitting out there now, we're the ones who are going to be in charge of having to drive this country forward over the next 20, 30, 40 years. We're the one, without going into it, like, you know, who's going to inherit all this debt and things like that. Like, we can sit back and we can hope that, sure, it'll be grand, but it's not going to be grand. You can emigrate, you can go and do your own thing abroad, you can come back and things are better. But what if no one ever makes it better? We need to stand up, we need to take a collective responsibility for this country, and that needs to start now. You're never too young to start. I thought that we were kind of sitting around being like, sure, when we're out enough, and when we've a network, and when we've experience, and when we've this, when we've that, we'll go out and do stuff. No, you start, you do it now, and you learn. You don't have to succeed, but it's just a case of go out there and do good stuff. Do stuff that's good for the community, and maybe we can make a fist of this country. We were 100 years as an independent country. Can we say we've risen above mediocrity for more than 5 years at any given time? No, that needs to change. But how can that change? And I suppose that's kind of why people talk about kind of social entrepreneurship. I suppose the way I look at social entrepreneurship is we have what is called a charity model, right? Basically, that means we kind of fundraise and we operate off donations. If I was back again, would we do that? I'm not sure. I finished college. The day I finished college, there was checks for €80,000 waiting for me. As someone who'd done a business degree, I didn't know that I need memorandum and articles of association in order to claim and cash them checks. But sure, we learned that the hard way. So if you're ever thinking of doing it, just make sure you get the mems and arts done fairly lively. If you want to find out what they are, we did them in junior cert business. Yeah. So that was good crack. Like we arrived out, and if I went back, I actually wouldn't even do it myself. I'd say I'd be so embarrassed. If I went back and looked at the projections that we thought we'd have, sure, we'd 80,000 grand finishing college without ever particularly looking too hard for it, and sure, we thought we'd be millionaires overnight. This social entrepreneurship crack, it is absolutely simple. We thought it'd be handy, but unfortunately, it's not like that. And you have to go out and you have to work really hard, and the most important thing you do is you need to get yourself a business model. You need to get it early. Can you have a business model that is based around charitable donations? Yes, you can. Is it an incredibly competitive and tough space? Yes, it is. Do you need to work incredibly hard? You need to have very strong networks? Yes, you do. But if you're thinking about doing the whole social entrepreneurship thing, I'd ask you to kind of ask yourself a few questions. The first question I'd ask you to ask yourself is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for your career, because you think it's a great career move? Or are you doing it because it's good for your ego, because you know you'll get to kind of talk on stages like this, or you'll get to go on the radio and people will want to listen to what you're going saying? If you're doing it for either of them reasons, don't bother, because you'll get found out, right? So just don't bother doing it, right? The third thing is, if you're doing it because you fundamentally want to do good, you fundamentally want to take a collective responsibility for the future of the country, then maybe you're in with a shot. But actually what you need to do is, you don't need to say, okay, I want to make a difference, I need to become a social entrepreneur. You need to take a step back and you need to say, okay, there's some things in society that I fundamentally want to change. What's the best way for me to do that? So the person actually who I have the most respect for as somebody who has changed society is my football manager. Right? My football manager is a tax consultant who works in his front living room in Palmerstown in the suburbs of Dublin, right? But he did that and he became self-employed because it gave him the independence to do whatever he wanted, right? So in the early 90s, when Kieran thought that there should have been TG Carr, this was before TG Carr, before TG Carr, he didn't understand why he had to pay his TV licence for RTE, because they never put on any shows in Irish and he never liked watching any of the ones in English, he only wanted ones in Irish. So what he said is, I'm not going to pay my TV licence, and they put him in Mountjoy prison, right? For not paying his TV licence. Now, he was self-employed, he was able to say, how grand, should I go to prison, I can take a stand, I can do whatever I want, and off the back of that TG Carr was founded, right? And if he to be a social entrepreneur, he probably could have made that decision because his organisation might have been threatened and you would have had reputational damage and things like that. So actually a lot of it is, how can you position yourself best to bring about the change you want to see in society? And I suppose social entrepreneurship is one way of doing it, but I think you also should look at it as, is it that you become self-employed? Is it that you can do stuff on a voluntary basis? Is it that you're going to come up with some new model that no one's ever even heard of and thought about, and then spend about 20 years trying to explain to people how it works? But that's kind of the thing. And then the third and final thing I kind of say is, I suppose if you're going to do it right. I know for myself from going, and I suppose we're at this now 2 years since we finished college, the pressure is enormous. So if you're looking for a job with job security, don't really bother, you're not going to get it. I don't know where I'm going to be living in 2 months. I've lived in probably about 4 places in the last year. You constantly have to surf around trying to get as cheap a rent as possible because, you know, working on the minimum wage with a load of college debt isn't exactly, it's not sexy. Yeah, I was looking for a better word, but look, we go for sexy. It's not particularly sexy, but like, you know, it's very fulfilling. Like we get to work with some phenomenal young people right around the country who are doing some really great things. Some of you are here today. That's great to see, and hopefully those who aren't already involved are definitely going to get involved after this. You know, but I suppose to do it right is tough because there's bills that need to be paid, and you have staff, and they have to be paid in offices, and they have to be paid and things like that. And then people will come and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll give you a few bob. And maybe you can take that money, but that money mightn't be right for your organisation. So for example, one thing we get the whole time is, we get corporates ringing us up and saying, oh here, we'd love to give you some money, but we need for you to put our employees out volunteering alongside some of the students. Now, like, when I was in college, the last thing I would have wanted was basically probably volunteering, if I'm honest about it, right? Which is a bit ironic. But now it's good crack, so that's different, right? But A was to be volunteering, but B was to be volunteering beside some lad from some company which I didn't really know what to do, but I knew they had something to do with like law or accounting or something like that, and he was wearing a suit and I wasn't, and we were there having a real awkward conversation, like, you know, that would have never appealed to me, and I know it doesn't really appeal to students, so like we always say, sorry, we can't do that. But I see a lot of organisations out who set out to do something, and set out to change something in society, and very quickly transform into just surviving. So they'll do whatever they need to do to simply survive, and as a result, you see, something that does my head in is when you see charities celebrating like 50-year anniversaries, because that means it's 50 years since they tried to set out to solve a problem and they still haven't solved it. So it's a case of, you know, if you're going to do something, do it right, have your principles, stick to your principles, and I think I have much more respect for someone who fails sticking to their principles than succeeds by just going off and doing something that kind of isn't really what they wanted to do in the first place, and isn't really impacting the problem they were trying to solve. But I suppose that's kind of the main thing. There's going to be questions and answers in that after, so I'm sure you'll probably have a few questions, probably more directed towards the lads than me, because as you probably know at this stage I'm a bit of a spoofer anyway. But sure, that's the size of it. But sure, thanks a million for listening to me anyway.